After all these years, we've finally found the mastermind behind all of Fazbear Entertainment's crimes. The one person that kept the company alive, that allowed the creation of the new Freddy's, the VR games, the Funtime service, the Pizzaplex, everything. And who is it? Well, according to a large portion of the fandom, the genius behind the horror is a character we've never heard of. Mrs. Afton. This idea was first proposed in Game Theory's Ultimate FNAF timeline. This 4-video series is great for the time it was released, and even though it's got a few flaws, I think the biggest oversight Matpat made in that series is not fully explaining why he thought the wife of serial killer William Afton was the leader of Freddy Fazbear's. Nowadays, most theorists believe this idea is outdated and honestly ridiculous. But I'm here to say that Matpat was right. Just not in the way we thought. Is Mrs. Afton a relevant character? Who's the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment? And what new evidence is there to suggest that these two characters are one and the same? We're about to find out. I'm Withered Circle, and this is the revelation we've been waiting for the past 4 years. First off, where did the whole Mrs. Afton idea come from, and what even is it about? Like I mentioned earlier, the idea of Mrs. Afton being the CEO came from the Game Theorist Ultimate FNAF timeline from early 2023. In it, Matpat told the story of Mrs. Afton, wife of William Afton, who, after the FNAF 6 fire, was left alone, but with the rights to all Fazbear Entertainment property. Using this, she began the return of the company, creating the Help Wanted VR game, and starting the Fazbear Funtime service we see in FNAF AR. According to that timeline, her motive for all the locations and services in the modern era was to crack the code to possession and rebuild her family, with Burntrap as Afton, Gregory as Crying Child, Glamrock Freddy as Michael, and the Mega Pizzaplex security guard, Vanessa, as Elizabeth. Here's the thing, on the surface, this seems like a pretty solid narrative, but there's a problem. This entire story has zero good evidence going for it. The only indication of Mrs. Afton ever existing is this random staff bot in the Pizzaplex's underground, surrounded by other bots with traits similar to the Afton family. So while casual fans enjoyed the story, theorists were skeptical. The entire timeline up until then was very well explained and told, but this just felt wrong? Well, I'm here to tell you that Matpat wasn't actually that far off from the truth. The reason Mrs. Afton became a popular conclusion at the time was because we didn't really know who the actual CEO of Fazbear Entertainment was. We know of the two original founders of the company, William Afton and Henry Emily, but we have reason to assume that at some point in the mid-80s, they lost ownership of the company. In FNAF 1, we can find a newspaper detailing the closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that introduces a CEO character that we were going to see several more times in the future. After a long struggle to stay in business after the tragedy that took place there many years ago, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has announced that it will close by year's end. Despite a year-long search for a buyer, companies seem unwilling to be associated with the company. These characters will live on. In the hearts of kids, these characters will live on. CEO. This same CEO character was mentioned again in FNAF 2 at the very end of the game, announcing the closure of the 1987 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. After being open only a few short weeks, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is closing its doors. The new animatronics will be scrapped due to possible malfunctions. However, the original characters are being kept in hopes of a possible reorganization of the company. It's a minor setback. We are confident that we will reopen someday, even if it is with a much smaller budget. CEO Fazbear Ent. Bear in mind that in FNAF 2, William has to infiltrate the FNAF 2 location in order to be a night guard there. And Phone Guy tells us that Fazbear Entertainment is looking for the original restaurant owner, meaning the CEO of the company isn't Henry Emily either. So, with the two founders out of the picture, we have absolutely no idea who the CEO of the company is. Or do we? Well, we actually got some pretty decent clues from the week before, the best FNAF book ever made. In it, we play as Ralph, the phone guy, in the FNAF 1 location, meaning we were bound to get some lore reveals about the location and how it works. And, of course, we do. On page 67, just don't. Stop. I know you want to do it, but don't. On page 67, we see the aftermath of Ralph not performing proper maintenance on the Bonnie animatronic. Ralph's boss calls him up, and this happens. Quote from the book. The next day, you're woken up by a phone call. It's your boss. Ralph, today we had our biggest crowd in a long time, she says. A reporter was even there to see how we've been doing since we reopened, and we were on track for a big comeback story. Guess what happened? You swallow. Was anyone Bitten? Worse, she says. We know you sabotaged the animatronics. Ralph, you're fired. Fazbear Entertainment's lawyers will be in touch. This book outright tells us that whoever's in charge of Fazbear between 1987 and FNAF 1 is a woman. And yeah, I know, FNAF theorists when they see a woman and all that, but there is actually reason to assume this character in particular is important. Throughout the week before, we're told that Ralph has a pretty important role in the FNAF 1 location, essentially being considered a manager, even though officially he isn't one. And in Secret of the Mimic, a game where Ralph is literally name-dropped as an employee of Murray's Costume Manor, one of the emails William Afton sends to the MCM employees describes an offer for the recipient to become the manager of a Fazbear franchise location. If skilled MCM employees were offered manager positions in a Fazbear location, who's to say Ralph wasn't offered one too? Anyway, if Ralph is so important to the location, whoever his boss is must be way higher up in the company, and almost definitely the CEO described in those FNAF 1 and 2 newspapers I mentioned earlier. Her desire for the location to have a big comeback story lines up with her words from the newspapers too. But could this really be Mrs. Afton? Is that even possible? Well, to determine that, we need to look back at where Matpat got his Mrs. Afton theory from, the 3 major pieces of evidence for Mrs. Afton's importance. But before that, let me ask you a simple question. Do you get enough sleep to process the insanity of the FNAF timeline? My guess is no. Well, I've got the solution for you. The sponsor of today's video, MantaSleep. MantaSleep is a sleep mask company that makes masks that actually work. I recently got the MantaSleep sound mask, and let me tell you, as a FNAF theorist that probably reads comments and watches theory videos a little bit too much, a break from the never-ending stream of light bombarding my eyes is very much needed. MantaSleep's masks are versatile, completely adjustable, and give you 100% darkness when you sleep, meaning you can become just as blind as the average Mike victim believer from the comfort of your own home. The sound mask also comes with really cool adjustable Bluetooth headphones, meaning that not only can you see the POV of Bite victim after 1983, but you can also listen to your favorite content while you're in bed. It just makes falling asleep easier. The mask is super comfortable and can also be used if you sleep on your side, like me. It's easy to wear, clean, and is perfect for recovering from watching a 2-hour-long video essay on the secret lore of some random FNAF spin-off game. My point is, the mask is just good. You can use my code WITHERED for 10% off your next MantaSleep purchase. Thanks again to MantaSleep for sponsoring this video. Anyway, back to the video. Let's get back into the 3 most important pieces of Mrs. Afton evidence. Let's start with the first piece of evidence we get for this character being important, the Immortal and the Restless. This is a spoof soap opera that plays in between the Nights of Sister location, showing Vlad the Vampire, his mistress Clara, and their son. This is clearly meant to evoke the relationship between Afton and his wife, with the son possibly being Michael. Despite Vlad's insistence of the baby not being his, it's very clear they're extremely similar, just like how Michael described himself as similar to William in Sister Location's final cutscene.
They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
In the show, Clara is the major instigator of the story's progression. She causes Vlad to try and improve, she burns his house down and steals his diamond ring, and most importantly of all, she's the reason the two are reunited at the end of the story. Clara is important. Others have said the story has more similarities to the plot of Secret of the Mimic, but I think it's more about the Aftons due to its parallels to the rest of the FNAF story. Anyway, this is an example of a Mrs. Afton type figure being shown as important to the narrative. Now, let's move on to our next game, FNAF 6, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, and its most infamous minigame, Midnight Motorist. I'll cut to the chase because we both know what this minigame is about. What I want to focus on is the 2 characters you encounter inside the player's house, the runaway and the couch person. While the identities of these characters are unknown, it's speculated that the couch person in particular is either Michael or Mrs. Afton. While I'm personally leaning towards it being Michael at the moment, I have a track record of consistently being wrong about Midnight Motorist, so I'm totally open to the possibility of the couch person being William Afton's wife. It's certainly not confirmed or anything, but if true, could give more evidence to her being an important character in the story. And now, let's get to our final and most important example, the Staffbot family in the security breach silo. This table of Staffbots is found in a room heavily connected to the Mimic and how it got into the Pizzaplex, and contains Staffbots modeled after members of the Afton family. A headless one for the Bite victim, a baby bot for Elizabeth, a balloon boy for Michael, a magician for William, and finally, at the head of the table, a female Staffbot with blue hair, Mrs. Afton. Matpat interpreted this particular bot being at the head of the table as a sign that whoever William's wife was, she was planning the return of Fazbear Entertainment and was behind the shenanigans that the company gets up to in the modern era, with her motivation being to put her family back together. Well, there's one extremely important connection that these staff bots are hiding that I need to get into right now, because the trick to tie it all together is actually hidden in the files of Security Breach. If you look closely at the files of these specific staff bots, you'll notice that the Mrs. Afton one is called Nannybot in the files. It feels a bit weird and unfitting for a character that's clearly meant to look important. What's more, this Nannybot model isn't used a single other time in-game, only appearing as its clean version in the files. So whatever this bot is, it being a nanny has got to be important, right? Well, let's listen to this audio log from Secret of the Mimic, shall we?
Ed, I hope this message reaches you as soon as you get a break. I have to go help the Fall Fest crew, just for a few days until the installation is finished. It's hard to explain. I just have this terrible feeling like I need to be there so nothing goes wrong. Just in case. Trisha will babysit David while I'm gone. I love you both, and I'll be back next week.
Babysit, huh? Whoever Trisha is, she's introduced as a character both Fiona and Edwin are familiar with. Fiona doesn't introduce her to Edwin, so she's treated by name right away. By this point in the timeline, the Murrays are close with both the Emily and Afton families. So what if Trisha is actually Trisha Afton, William Afton's wife? This idea has been proposed in the past, but I don't think anyone's ever made the connection to the Nannybot before, but don't fact check me. Tying this new appearance of Mrs. Afton to that original line about the babysitter is interesting, and could give this theory more ground to stand on. So far, we've gathered a pretty decent amount of evidence to conclude that Mrs. Afton is important, at least in some way. The week before and its lore revelations particularly make it likely that Mrs. Afton held some kind of important position at Fazbear Entertainment in the early days of the company. But there's one question that we need to answer. How could Mrs. Afton be the CEO in both of these eras? How could she go from being the head of the company in the 80s to still being there in the mid-2000s? Well, the answer is simple. She couldn't. It's just not possible. I think that after the By the Video Free, or possibly the missing children incident, William and Henry were forced to sell the company to a third party to keep it afloat, and that third party was Mrs. Afton, just not the mother of Afton's children by that point. Over the past couple of years, we've received a lot of evidence for the fact that William had another child beside Michael, crying child, and Elizabeth, Vanessa. And I know what you're thinking. How is that even possible? Well, we know from FNAF AR that Vanessa was probably born in 1997, judging by her username and birthday in that game. In Security Breach, when listening to the therapy tapes, we learned that Vanessa had an abusive father called Bill, and that her mother presumably kicked the bucket after he won the case. Bill, huh? Almost like William. Also, Vanessa is literally stated to be Afton's daughter in the FNAF movie. Sure, it's an alternate continuity, but it's still a clue. That 1997 from FNAF AR isn't just a random date either. Assuming FNAF 1 happens in 1993, a 4-year time span for William to meet Mrs. Afton, aka Ralph's boss from the week before, experiment with remnant and possession, have Vanessa win the custody case over her, then get spring-locked, isn't all that bad. It even explains why the FNAF 1 location is in a state of complete ruin when the Follow Me minigames happen. This would also be why the glitch trap program targets Vanessa in Help Wanted. It knows she's tied to Afton's past, and in its task to mimic him, focuses on turning her into its disciple. So, essentially, Afton's 4 children would have 2 different mothers. The mom of the first 3 Afton kids, and the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment, Vanessa's mom. Something that lends even more credence to this idea is a minor character from the week before, Dave. Dave is a technician working at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, who's almost tied with Ralph for Employee of the Month awards, and has an uncanny knowledge of how the animatronics function. He's also described as rude and unpleasant by Ralph. In The Silver Eyes, Dave Miller is the alias William Afton goes under when he disguises himself as a security guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And that's not all. In Ultimate Custom Night, a game where we play as William, one of the challenges is called Old Friends, containing characters Afton created and caused the possession of. And also Phone Guy, an old friend. If this is true, and William is Dave from the week before, this could explain how he met the CEO of the company, considering he's been there long enough to win that many Employee of the Month awards. Afton is infiltrating that location for a while, possibly while his son Michael is in it during FNAF 1. This would enable him to get close with and manipulate the CEO of the company, eventually having Vanessa, and then getting spring-locked. Hell, Afton knowing the CEO explains how he's able to come back to the FNAF 1 location after it's already shut down. The guy practically owns the keys to the place. It all makes sense. It all clicks together uncannily well. But there's just one problem. Those connections I made earlier between Trisha the babysitter and the Afton nanny bot, the Immortal and the Restless, and even Midnight Motorist, they all kind of fall flat with this interpretation. The earliest we can place Afton meeting the CEO, or his second wife, is about 1985. So what does it mean? Well, I think that in some sense, Matpat could have been right. Afton's first wife could still be important to the story. Could it be that the Mimic is using her as a template for Afton's behavior? Could she be the one behind the modern era? I really don't know. The main problem with the Mrs. Afton CEO theory that Matpat proposed is that the timelines are way too far apart, and she'd be way too old by the time of Security Breach, which is exactly why I like the interpretation I made today better. It ties together that original CEO narrative, while still keeping the timeline fairly normal. Sure, Vanessa being an Afton is something that not everyone agrees on, but I think this interpretation really gives it more evidence. So, we might not have proven Matpat right, but the connections he made are certainly there, and definitely valid. But who's the modern-day CEO of Fazbear Entertainment? Who's the one pulling the strings? I think that's a question that will be answered very soon, hopefully when the next FNAF game comes out. Honestly, it could be anyone, but whoever it is, it's very likely they're possessed by the Glitchtrap virus, aka the Mimic, because at this point we can be 99% certain that Glitchtrap is just the Mimic, maybe with some of Afton's memories or agony sprinkled in. It's totally possible that Matpat was right about the first wife of Afton being the CEO, but it's highly unlikely. Overall, I think what I proposed today could absolutely be right. When I started working on the script, I didn't think I'd actually believe what came out of it, but I'm pretty confident that this interpretation is correct. So before we finish off, let's summarize and build a timeline of all this, to explain where everything fits in. After the bad press Fazbear Entertainment Incorporated got from the By the Video Free and the missing children incident, Henry and William sold the company to a third-party CEO, kept Henry on as a designer, while William distanced himself from Fazbear. In 1987, the new Freddy's closed as Henry left the company, and the CEO brought Freddy's back as the FNAF 1 location. At this point, William infiltrates that location as Dave, and the two get close and eventually have Vanessa. William's goal in all this isn't to find new love or anything. At this point, he's still experimenting on his daughter Elizabeth and keeping his son Michael under his control. Instead, his objective is to gain access to the FNAF 1 location so he can access the possessed animatronics inside. Eventually, William and the CEO divorce, starting a heated custody case over Vanessa, which leads to William forcing his daughter to lie in court, causing his wife to take her own life as William takes Vanessa in. Or maybe William was the one who did it. With his wife out of the picture, whether by his hand or her own, William has full access to the FNAF 1 Freddy's and the floor plan of the entire building, letting him easily locate the safe room and his beloved Spring Bonnie suit. After taking the animatronic endoskeletons to his bunker and using them in his experiment, William comes back for his fursuit and gets spring-locked, leaving Michael alone with his younger sister Vanessa, who is likely left in an orphanage after all this goes down. Michael then goes into the sister location bunker, gets scooped, and vows to find his father, leading to FNAF 6. Speaking of FNAF 6, the only reason Henry has control of Fazbear again is because this CEO died, making him the only person with rights to the company. So he plans the FNAF 6 fire, burns everything to the ground, and ends the first FNAF saga. Vanessa, however, isn't free just yet. So, in conclusion, while the identity of the modern era CEO is still up to debate, I'm pretty confident that the CEO between 1985 and 1993 is Afton's second wife. After she dies sometime in the late 90s or early 2000s, Afton temporarily takes over until he dies in the safe room. I do think the connections Matpat made in his timeline and the 3 connections I pointed out today are important to the present timeline. I actually think it's likely the M1 branch of the Mimic program, which was designed to mimic Fiona, decided to model itself after the Afton family when Glitchtrap shows up. In Secret of the Mimic, F10N4, aka the Maxis terminal controlled by M1, takes on a maternal role in the Murray family, and the dynamic in the modern era is very similar. I actually have a video on how and why M1 is controlling the Pizzaplex, which should be on screen right now, so consider giving it a watch. But essentially, if M1 stopped imitating Fiona and instead tried to focus on Mrs. Afton, it explains why we've got this staffbot imagery in the silo, and, again, why Vanessa specifically is targeted by the Glitchtrap virus. I haven't given up on the idea of the first wife of Afton being important though. I think it's more than likely that not only was she Trisha from Secret of the Mimic, but that she was also a shareholder in the early days of Fazbear Entertainment, and that could tie into her involvement in medias like the Immortal and the Restless. So overall, while we can't really be sure of what these characters' roles are, they're definitely important to the story. And with that, that's all I have to say about Mrs. Afton. I hope you enjoyed this FNAF analysis, and that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Remember, stay safe, and keep on theorizing.